Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Chalk Talk here in the DK Pittsburgh Sports Steelers YouTube channel. Chris Halicke here with another episode, and this time we're going to look at Beanie Bishop. It was a pretty productive year for him, especially being a rookie, an undrafted rookie out of West Virginia. He ended up having to step into a slot corner role pretty much right away. Cam Sutton was suspended for the first 8 games of the season. There was no other true guy that could end up really taking that spot, and Beanie stepped up, and in those first 8 games while Sutton was out, he had 3 interceptions, recorded a 4th in the last game of the season, despite playing in a much lesser role. Pretty productive year. It wasn't perfect, there were some things he had to clean up, and but we're going to take a look at those 4 interceptions today and see what Beanie did well in these plays. And then, okay, well, how can he do more of this in his second year? How can he help clean up some more things so that, he can become a better player? And while this won't get too in depth of the things he needs to work on, because obviously we're seeing the result of 4 interceptions, you can kind of see just a little bit of some of the things that he did well and that he can continue to do better in these plays. So this first one, the Steelers end up being in cover 2. You've got 2 high safeties. You're going to have 5 underneath defenders. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are all going to be underneath, and Beanie is going to be going and taking this middle zone here called the hook zone. And you can see him, eyes on the quarterback, having a pretty good idea of what's going on. But then, when this guy starts to attack the middle of the field, especially against middle field open, Rodgers is going to think, okay, I'm going to have enough to be able to put that about right there. Well, Beanie does a really good job of flipping his hips around, and the throw ends up being a little bit behind him. We'll see that from the end zone view here in just a second. But does a really good job of flipping his hips around and making a play on the football, taking advantage of the throw. Mistake by the quarterback, and, you can take advantage of that, and that's exactly what he does. And you can see here on this end zone angle, eyes on the quarterback, and that'll also help tell, once the snap, because if one thing that the quarterback will always look for is, especially if he's looking in this direction, he can see, whatever defenders. If this defensive back is looking in this direction and not eyes locked on the guy he was over, that's a pretty good tell that it's zone coverage, which means he's going to be covering some zone, and he's most likely dropping and going to be taking that zone right there. So, he knows, okay, if this, receiver ends up coming into my zone, I've got to make sure that I get enough depth. And so he does a good job here. Again, when the throwing motion starts, okay, it's flip the hips around and make a play. Now, again, that ball probably needs to be about right there, and it ends up being, caught right there. Again, if it's probably where it should be, there's no chance Beanie makes a play on that. It's open, it's completed, and that's it. But again, it's doing a good job of, being in that kind of, shuffle and then flipping the hips around and making a play. That's good stuff. That shows ball skills, being able to adjust to a pass. Because, when the pass is first let go, he's in this position and he winds up getting to that position relatively quickly. That's not easy to do. So he's an athletic player, got some good ball skills. It's good stuff, man. That's a heck of a play. Steelers end up being in cover 3 on this one. It kind of looks like cover 1. You got 1 high safety, and everybody else is really, really close to the line of scrimmage. This is looking like cover 1. Again, when we talk about cover 3 disguises, we did that last week. You look at that kind of stuff, and you're like, oh, this is another one of those ways that the Steelers, again, it's not that much of a disguise here, but it's still one way that they can disguise. So Beanie's right here. He is, when you get into this cover, straight up cover 3, you got your 3 deep, and then you're going to have 4 underneath zones That's the way, cover 3 works. So he's going to go here. He's going to be right here. He's going to stay right here. And then Beanie's got this curl flat area. And so what he's got to do is if somebody's in the flat here, he's going to make sure, okay, I'm on him while he's in my zone. And if he somehow doesn't out and up, or if he stays in the zone, then but if he does this out and up, then he might trust this deep defender to get him. And so this is where Beanie might have to improve a little bit here, because this is eyes totally on Rogers the whole time. And you don't really see him watch for Garrett Wilson, who's who ends up being the intended receiver, because he doesn't see him go up. And one of the weaknesses in cover 3 is this window right there between the deep defender and the curl flat defender, because if there's any other kind of route that's going to take away the deep defender, then this deep defender can't come up if this guy ends up, going past the curl flat, which is what ends up happening. It's trying to attack that window. You can see that window's open. And, Beanie doesn't get there in time. Porter has to respect this guy because that's his responsibility in cover 3, being, covering the deep third. And this is just a mistake. This is a great ball from Rogers. It's right on the money. Hits the receiver in the chest. Beanie takes advantage. Intercepted. Part of the job is also being opportunistic, but you can kind of see right there, you would like to see a little bit more of, okay, it's not easy to do, but you'd like to see him be able to keep an eye on the quarterback. Obviously, it's zone coverage, but especially if he's looking in that direction, maybe give an extra glance. What's this guy doing? Because if he starts to, then turn up field like he does, if he glances at that, then maybe he can get there a little bit. He doesn't go into a backpedal. Maybe he could just flat out, turn and run with him. While that's not man coverage, you can also see there is nobody there. There's nobody to cover. That's one of the kind of parts of zone defense is you have to be able to adjust. And so, they obviously, benefit from a big mistake by Wilson. And then Beanie ends up running this thing all the way, pretty much all the way back, and Devontae Adams ends up tackling him at the 1-yard line. But again, part of the job, you got to be opportunistic. That's another part of it too, and Beanie definitely was that. Steelers here are this is against the Giants the very next week, so, you got 2 interceptions against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, and then the very next week playing the Giants, you get another one. And this is the 2 games before Sutton came back from his suspension. So this is making a heck of a push to be like, hey, I need to keep playing. But you got cover 2 here, but this ends up being Tampa 2. Minkah Fitzpatrick being right here. He's going to get a little bit more depth and play back there while you've got more of these 4 zones down here. So this is more Tampa 2, which is like a pseudo cover 3. It's not really cover 3, but, you get, again, this guy, if this is true cover 2, he's a little further down. But because he's of how deep he is, this is definitely Tampa 2. And Beanie's right here. Again, it's what do you do whenever a receiver, goes into your zone? Nobody's really there yet. Porter, he's got that guy right there. And whenever he continues to go deep, he's passing him off to that deep defender. This guy starts to kind of run into that zone. And so Beanie steps up. And, of course, once he sees Daniel Jones lock in and start to make that play, okay, well, I'm going to go crash and see if I can make a tackle. But also, you're also there if the ball is overthrown, which it is, and he's able to then, make the interception, and that's good stuff. And, Beanie does a much better job here of being able to kind of read the quarterback, again, eyes on the quarterback, and also read, okay, look at what this, that little glance right there, looking at what the receiver's doing there. Okay, that guy, Porter's got him. Okay, this guy starts to more run into that zone, and, Daniel Jones still looking in this direction, but when Jones looks over here, Beanie recognizes, okay, that receiver's running there. I got to react to that. Ball comes out. Now I got to go run. I got to be ready to tackle. But, when the ball's overthrown, you can be opportunistic. And that's exactly what Beanie does. Interception. Good stuff. Again, part of the job, you got to be opportunistic. I'm going to keep saying that. All right, Steelers here, again, kind of showing more of a cover 1 look, but they end up being in cover 3. These are your deep defenders right there. And you end up having, again, there's your 4 underneath. And Beanie right here, again, if the ball doesn't come out so fast, you can see Burrow's already, about to get rid of the ball. Beanie is the curl flat defender right there because this, tight end ends up running that quick out. That would be his guy. But when the ball comes out that quickly, again, read and react, support your team, right? Support your teammates. This gets thrown right at Patrick Queen. Queen's right there on him. And Queen ends up almost intercepting it, but the ball ends up getting juggled, and then Beanie's right there to, once again, going to say it again, be opportunistic and make the interception. I mean, seriously, when we look at it from this angle back here, that's like right there about to hit the ground. I mean, that's good stuff. But again, when you have, this right here, you can see the ball's already coming out, be able to read and react, And when you are, in the right, a lot of it, whenever you end up getting these interceptions, you end up being in the right place at the right time, even if it's not like your specific responsibility, and that's just having good awareness. And that's exactly what Beanie did there. It's a heck of a play. I really thought Queen was going to end up coming away with that. I remember covering the game. I thought Queen was going to come away with that. And then whenever I saw the ball bounce and go the other way, and then all of a sudden you see, this kind of stuff from the teammates, you're like, man, what happened over there? And then you see the replay. You're like, oh my, Beanie intercepted that. Being this kind of a player helps. And it also goes to show that the floor can be pretty high. If you can start to clean up the other stuff, the more stuff that allows you to just basically do your job, then you can do the extra things on top of that, and it makes for a pretty good football player. Didn't really dive into it with this one, but maybe we can do it on another Chalk Talk. He does have some things to clean up, both in terms of zone coverage, but especially man coverage. There's a reason why he's playing in the slot, not playing on the outside, not the best man coverage corner. But when the Steelers run cover 3 more than anything else, you got to be a good zone coverage defender. And Beanie, while he had his issues, was also very opportunistic. And that's a good thing for the Steelers to have. So we'll see what year 2 holds. But, these 4 interceptions from last season, it's enough for Mike Tomlin to be like, all right, I'm giving you the upper hand. He's going to compete with Dante Kent, 7th-round pick. Not, it's not being handed to him. But if Beanie does things really well and he can build off of this, could be a pretty good year for him. So thank you for tuning into this Chalk Talk. Catch you guys on the Flippity Flip. We'll see you later.